Happening now in New York, an appeals court gives President Trump a win, tossing out his massive civil fraud penalty that could have cost Mr. Trump $500 million or even more. President Trump sounding off on that decision in a two-part social media post, saying in part, total victory in the fake New York State Attorney General Letitia James case. I greatly respect, the president says, the fact that the court had the courage to throw out this unlawful and disgraceful decision that was hurting business all throughout New York State. So let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe with more details. Ed, what were the arguments that got Mr. Trump the win?
Be very clear, the president is suggesting here that the entire thing's been tossed out. That is not the case. What has been tossed out by this appeals court decision is the current amount of money he would owe in the case, not the underlying charges and the fact that he was convicted, but the now more than $500 million he would have to pay to the state of New York for his crimes. That now, by the Attorney General, Letitia James, is expected to be appealed. But the other thing that could still be appealed is the overall case, which is what we're now waiting to see whether President Trump decides to do. Does he take it all the way to Albany and what they call the Court of Appeals in New York, not the Supreme Court, but the Court of Appeals in the Empire State, to try to get the entire case overturned? The judges were bitterly divided on this one. A handful of them suggesting the whole thing should get tossed, others saying it should hold, but in agreement that ultimately the $500 million plus was too much money for someone to be paying. One of them alleging it was a violation of the Eighth Amendment and the prohibition on excessive fines. So the president here trying to cast this as total vindication, but that is not the case. And this overall, the underlying charges against him continue in court, as the Attorney General now says she plans to appeal the decision regarding the fine.
Such important differentiation there, Ed. Thank you for that. Another headline we know you're watching today is this so-called framework agreement on trade between the United States and the European Union. What do we know about the terms of that proposal, Ed?
It's still a framework, important to point that out, but they sort of shared more information overnight regarding what the U.S. and the European Union are working towards. And at this point now, the U.S. preparing to put 15% tariffs on European cars, pharmaceuticals, and other products. You should also expect to see the elimination of EU tariffs on American industrial goods exported onto that continent. You're also likely going to see in the coming months conversation about allowing more agricultural products from the United States to be sold in Europe. That has been a huge barrier for American farmers, fishermen, who haven't been able to sell their catchings, their harvest into Europe, whereas Europe can sell theirs into the United States, and now they can continue to do so, but with tariffs applied. So it'll be a big win for agriculture in this country should it come to pass. They decided to share more information about this now because the markets had been a little concerned. There'd been a lot of interest in this, and they wanted to sort of demonstrate really to the global economy, here's where we're headed. And in essence, it's a 15% tariff on everything coming in from the EU with some exceptions, and barrier to entry or tariffs being dropped on many American goods. But still, several weeks, if not months, of negotiating still to go before there's a formal agreement. And remember, the only one that's been formally signed is the one with the United Kingdom. All the others still in that framework stage because these complex trade negotiations can take several months, if not years, to finalize.
Well, Ed, you mentioned months to go on that point, but also the world is wondering if we are still not months to go on the end of Russia's war in Ukraine. They continue bombarding Ukraine. We're mindful that President Zelensky told President Trump that Vladimir Putin was essentially bluffing. So aside from lives on the line, the president's ability to get a deal done on that point is also on the line. Is there any confidence from the White House that Zelensky and Putin will actually have that meeting that the president wants?
Well, we haven't heard any public conversation about it since last week, right? So that's a signal that they are struggling to make that happen. And certainly the overnight developments, the really incredible lethal bombardment that Russia unleashed yet again, is another sign that this is far from over. You see here the president earlier this morning on his social media account suggesting in part that what Ukraine needs to be able to do is attack Russia. As he writes here, it's like a great team in sports that has a fantastic defense but isn't allowed to play offense. There's no chance of winning. It's like that with Ukraine and Russia, he says. Crooked and grossly incompetent Joe Biden wouldn't let Ukraine fight back. And then he adds later, interesting times ahead. What's interesting and yet to come is, will those two ever meet? What does the eventual security agreement from Europe and the United States look like? Does it perhaps give Ukraine more firepower to fight back? That is obviously what they've been seeking. But as of now, no, at least public forward momentum on what exactly, or whether exactly there will be a meeting between Zelensky and Putin. We are expecting the president's special envoy to Ukraine to be back in the region in the coming days.
We wait and we watch, and we know you have it. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much for talking to us today. We appreciate
Take care.
it. Good to see you.